Welcome, everyone. This is your round two Canucks this week. Sort of serving. We didn't do a really series preview, but this is great. We have one game. Patrick Fred told you back at the start of the year that the Canucks would be up 1-0 in the second round, in particular against the Edmonton Oilers. Would you have believed me?
Well, certainly not if you told me they'd be 5-0 in the process. I might have believed you. You never know. I had said this was a team that was good enough to make the playoffs, and they did. I didn't think they were a division winning team. I will fully admit that, but I thought they were a team that was good enough to make the playoffs. And, when you're good enough to make the playoffs, that means you are good enough to win a couple of games. Like, you're just not going to get swept. And to go back to my original point, that's what makes this whole season with the Oilers so fascinating. Because obviously the first three games under a different coach for the Oilers, Jay Woodcroft, who had 50 wins last year and then couldn't get it all back together this year for whatever reason. And then a win late in the year without McDavid, and the Oilers nonetheless having this incredible second 2/3 of the season, and a team that was picked to be a Stanley Cup contender, certainly in terms of wins and points and all the offense. You can see why. But in that game against the Canucks, even in the series against LA, we can see where there are some fractures in the foundation, and that this is not as powerful a team as perhaps we thought they were. To go back to your original question, in the end, no, I'm not shocked. And there's a lot of reasons why, and we can get into them, I'm sure, as we go along here.
Yeah, well, one of the things that puzzles me, you're the expert, I'm the doofus here, but, I'm used to watching, I'm not used to watching Canucks playoff hockey because it hasn't really happened for a while, but going back to, I was one of those kids. I was in line in 82 as soon as they beat the Blackhawks and rushed to the Coliseum to get our tickets for the Islanders in the Stanley Cup final. Those opportunities have been very rare for the Canucks, but I'm so used to watching playoff hockey over the history of this team that is tight. Tight.
Yeah.
Just like a playoff game. And last night really wasn't. I can't remember. I was struggling. I know they said on the broadcast that was the first time the Canucks have had a 3-goal comeback since the series against the Leafs in 94. The Canucks playoff history has almost always been boom or bust. Like when they get in the playoffs and they win around, they tend to go far. We haven't had a lot of first or second round exits. So it is to me, it's a little jarring that game last night was the way it was. One, that they got down as much as they were, even though they had probably been the better team. And then for them to come roaring back, it's just not what I'm used to from playoff hockey. We did see it in the Dallas Colorado series as well, a 3-goal turnaround. And someone made the point that, the Bruins game was 4-1 at one point as well against the Panthers. And that turned into a blowout basically the grudge fest. That's not what happened here. We saw the Canucks keep plugging away. They got a couple of breaks. Is this all because of goaltending? Because the goaltending on both sides was suspect last night?
To a degree, maybe, but more than anything, I think really, I think it's about how the two teams played defense. We knew that the Oilers were going to score goals, and going into it, you look at last year's series where they beat Vegas. They lost to Vegas. Vegas beat them. The Oilers still scored 21 goals, right? So you knew no matter what, however you want to slice it, we know this team can score goals. The challenge was going to be, could the Canucks outscore them? Now, Rick Tocchet's preference would be for that to be a 2-1 game. But in the end, they got it done, and they did persevere, and they found the goals they needed when they needed them. And a lot of that is in the end about how the Oilers play. We saw the Oilers wanting to play a bit more of a wide open game because they've got the skaters like McDavid, and when he's healthy, Leon Draisaitl. That leaves them vulnerable at the back, and they do not have the most convincing defense core. I've never been shy to say that.
I don't think anyone has.
No, and you look at the last two goals. Like Canucks' fourth goal and the fifth goal is just a story I've got coming up here, or people might even be looking at right now. That's the point I make. Is you look at those two goals and the way the Canucks completely took them apart in the neutral zone. Look at the tying goal for Zadorov. happens after the Canucks have a 3-on-4 rush through the neutral zone. Like, they have no business carrying that into the zone with control, and yet they do. And a lot of it was because they were able to put Edmonton on their heels and got them scrambling. And then they got low, and then they were able to kind of reverse it in a way that created some space underneath and allowed Zadorov to have a shooting lane to walk into. And then, of course, there were three Oilers between Zadorov and Stuart Skinner who couldn't even see the puck. And it was a great shot, right? But like, the Canucks made those two goals happen. You know, the go-ahead goal for Connor Garland, which is this incredible long set play that you can just see, like Dakota Joshua. You see the Canucks about to turn the puck over. If you watch the sequence, and you can see he takes off. He's down at the far end, and Zadorov hits him with a pass, and he's just this pivot point for Garland to skate into. And then Garland, of course, does his move, and somehow Stuart Skinner didn't know that he fakes a slap shot before taking his shot. And that it all worked out. And that was the Canucks in the end righting their ship, being the better team in the second half of the game, which is often going to happen when a team is leading by 3 goals. The Canucks were inevitably going to press, but they pressed in all the right ways. And so, yeah, I mean, the scoreline did have a statement about the goaltending, but it also had a statement about the way the game was just going to be played. And the Canucks defended, and once they ironically fell behind, defended well enough to give themselves the chance to come back, and then Edmonton's defense was atrocious.
You wrote a story for us this week that did very well, and that was highlighting the fact that 23 out of 24 ESPN hockey experts had picked the Oilers, which is just bizarre to me, considering, and I know people say, well, look what happened between Colorado and Winnipeg in the regular season.
Sure.
But, they were 4-0. I don't, including the one late in the year, and McDavid didn't play. Did McDavid play last night? I'm not sure if he did. First time ever he's been held without a shot on goal. But this is what's like now. Does that like are a whole bunch of people who made these predictions going like, oh shit, because an epic collapse where your goalie has to be in his own head, the whole team has to be wondering. Draisaitl looks to have a back injury, which it's not like I tweak my shoulder and be a bit better with a days. Like, back injuries are tough to heal. And McDavid was a complete non-factor. Like, I kept waiting for the onslaught to come. You talk about, yes, the Oilers score goals, and there was that brief little blitz, but overall in the second and third period, this team was not getting shots. They were not getting chances.
Yeah.
Like, if you're an Oilers fan, what do you hang on to think that those predictions are accurate? I mean, it may still be a 7-game series or a 6-game series. The Oilers may still win. But based on evidence last night, I say you play that exact same way, the Canucks might sweep them.
Yeah, I think what you hold on to is the power play, right? Like, your power play still delivered, right? They were 1-for-1. They were having this ridiculous opportunity early in the game on a ludicrously poorly executed line change on your defense. And they're lethal. They scored 9 power play goals against the Kings. They're up to 10 power play goals on in these playoffs, and falling on another strong season.
Haven't been scored on when they're penalty kill.
And they're perfect on the penalty kill. Like, their special teams are still an important story in this narrative. I mean, it's one game, great, but the Canucks, there are worries about the goaltending. Shilov's didn't look great. Even if you set aside how the goals happened, say, listen, it's tough for goalie to read any deflection. It was pointed out to me, say, if you want to look at, say, the 4th goal, which goes between his legs, well, he's actually expecting Hyman. He's reading Hyman to pick one of the top corners. So he's trying to play for that. So of course but the technique wasn't, so he was kind of screwed by his own technique. Fine. At the end of the day, the Oilers didn't create very much at 5-on-5, and so that is the problem for them. But what saves them is a power play goal, and if say they get a second power play goal, that's a different it's a different story. And the Canucks still mostly not looking all that efficient on their power play. It was a game. It was a game that was, about each team in many ways showing what they could and when they could in their strength. And the Oilers, that's their special teams. And the Canucks, it generally has been 5-on-5, certainly defending at 5-on-5. And that's still you got to score the goals, and I think we still think they have more talent. I mean, Draisaitl missing practice today on Thursday altogether, not even trying on the bench. Like Adam Henrique was involved, but then wasn't involved in the line rushes, and so you're not sure there. And Draisaitl, you've got to think they're going to just try to dress him and get him in the lineup, but. That's a guy that's clearly not going to be playing at anything close to 100%. I mean, he looked so uncomfortable when I was talking with a couple of buddies from my hockey team. We all thought the same thing. Like, that looks like a guy that's struggling with a back injury, and it's not a good place to be when you're a hockey player, or any person really. Let's ask you about that, Paul. But yeah, the Oilers are in a tough spot right now, that they're not firing at all cylinders. Canucks, at least I said, defending pretty well. It's going to come down to sort of managing your way through your goaltenders, I think, on both sides.
Obviously, we're used to at this time of year talking about salary cap and free agents and how much you spend. There's just something about the Oilers that it has never sat right, and that's in team construction, and they have these two amazing offensive players, and yes, an injury certainly to Draisaitl will change the series, but there's just something about that team that they've never got right. With all the first round picks, it's like, where are your complementary pieces? And I still think if this team, if Connor McDavid doesn't get a shot on goal, I'm not sure that they can win a game in this series.
Yeah,
particularly with Draisaitl's injuries. So when you look at the top to bottom roster, like how crucial is it for the Oilers to get McDavid going? Because I mean, I think the Canucks did a really good job, and I mean, granted, they needed this late blitzkrieg to actually get that win. But overall, when I look at these matchups now, I just look at the depth beyond those top two elite players.
Right.
And again, it's another game. Look, I thought Pettersson played well defensively. He had a couple of notable plays, but he's still not contributing anything offensively to speak of. That was another question. If I had asked you back in September, Patrick, if there'd be 1-0 and Pettersson and McDavid weren't factors in the series or in the game offensively, would you believe me? Probably not, with that caveat. But overall, how do you see the matchup going the rest of the series? Because aside from all the so-called experts who probably watched the Canucks twice this year, I'm hard pressed to think of a way that Edmonton could come back.
Well, I don't think it's going to be a short series, and I will eat my hat if I'm wrong. Edmonton's talented enough, and there's enough there that they're going to win a couple games here, at least, if not still win the series. Like, it's so hard to count out Connor McDavid, who's coming off yet again one of the great all-time seasons, right? Like, and he's a guy that has showed up.
Austin Matthews had a great season too.
Yeah, it's true. You're not wrong. Like, that's a great counterpoint, right? You're absolutely right. Like, Austin Matthews had a remarkable season, and he showed up in the playoffs as best he could, and they still couldn't get it done. So, like that is a little. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the win and anything can happen mentality, because in the end, the teams that make the Final Four or make the final generally are, in the top 5 teams in hockey. So that kind of, the Blues way they did it kind of takes that point away. But Connor McDavid, like, he's going to do everything he can to make things happen. I mean, the guy had 20 points last year in the playoffs, 33 points. I think people forget he had 33 points in 16 playoff games 2 years ago, in a year that we thought the Oilers might actually pull it all together. So, yeah, it's just, you just can't discount him. The fact that he didn't get a shot is interesting. The fact he has only one goal in the playoffs, I think, is somewhat interesting. But this is not going to be a short series. I don't think.
No. Well, I'm not suggesting it is. I'm just saying when I look at the lineups of these two teams, I think the Canucks are demonstrably better top to bottom. And look, comparing basketball and hockey is comparing apples and lug nuts. Like, they're just so different. But I'm noticing some trends really in the last couple of years. And I know much has been made of it in the NBA about, like, oh, no LeBron, no Steph, no Kevin Durant. I mean, one thing is age, but it's like you're seeing teams that have a philosophy. You're seeing teams that have depth. You're seeing teams that play a system have more success in both leagues, rather than just, here's our superstars, go win us a game. And I'm not suggesting that is Edmonton, but we all know, going back to the multiple first overall picks, goaltending, defense, right? The Canucks, that's the one thing. I'm not suggesting that Jay Beagle or Louis Eriksson or even Tyler Myers are superstars, but the Canucks had chased this top of the market free
Right.
agent and were an embarrassment, frankly. And now they're having success. It seems like you've got a coach who's come in, who puts
Yeah.
in belief. Everyone has their job to do. They do their job, and the team has success. It's not dependent upon, well, if they shut this guy down, we're really in trouble. I know it's going to be a long series. I know Edmonton's super talented, but I look at the way these two teams are constructed, and I think Vancouver is constructed much more soundly than Edmonton is.
Yeah.
Even though you can argue that Edmonton have the best two players in the series, although Quinn Hughes may have something to say about that.
When, I mean, Zach Hyman, whatever. Like the thing that Edmonton has done is they did go out and find a winger that was going to be the perfect fit for Connor McDavid. And I think we all know, looking long term, the Canucks need to find a winger that's going to be a great fit for Elias Pettersson. But no, your point is very strong. Like if you look and say, what is the Canucks third line? I mean, the Canucks third line was a huge story last night. We've barely talked about it. That they found their mojo that they had in the first game, that they had for so much of the season, that we've been saying, where the heck is Dakota Joshua? Well, Dakota Joshua had a fantastic game. Connor Garland obviously played the way we've mostly come to expect him to play night in, night out. The Oilers' third line was non-existent. Like they were up against Pettersson, and while Pettersson and Höglander and themselves maybe didn't have create all those chances. Think about Ilya Mikheyev. Like he was on top of the puck. He got a bunch of chances. No one's shocked he didn't bury them, but he was there. He made things happen, and that was a lot of it was up against the Oilers' third line. And Corey Perry was. Corey Perry was. Where was he? He wasn't anywhere. And like
someone should issue a missing persons alert.
Yeah, they really should put a missing persons report out for him. But this is an inside
joke there.
Yeah, this is something that's happening. What's happened here is that the Canucks management group sat down and said, okay, what do we need to actually add to this roster? And they didn't go over the top in looking for depth wingers the way the past. You mentioned Beagle and Roussel. I mean, I thought Roussel, in hindsight, he got her knee hurt and he would have been a great fit for Bo Horvat, but he was a depth winger. And, they paid a lot to have him. And in the end, he had one goal his final season here. Sam Lafferty is a fourth liner, and he had 12 goals this year. Like they've done well finding useful players for not a terribly big cap hit, recognizing how to make that all work. Pettersson, when he's on his game, obviously we know he's fantastic. He still hasn't found that, but he certainly looked a lot better last night. Miller, that goal JT Miller scored, oh my goodness, like that. I think he said, what did he say? He's been practicing that tip for 10 years and never actually made it work, and there he goes and makes it work. So yeah, your point's well taken. And obviously the top end of the Oilers, at least certainly up front, is much higher than the Canucks. The Canucks is pretty good, but it's still much higher than the Canucks. The depth matters, and then I think that defense core and the way that Rick Tocchet has found a system and a sort of a style of play and expectation that leads his defensemen to success. He's found a really nice balance between, you want to build the system for the players you have, but you also want to lead them to somewhere they don't know they can get towards a system that's maybe not one that they're anticipating. And they are so smart about recovering pucks and moving the puck to a teammate and not just chipping it out. That's made their defense core so much more viable, I would say. Like Tyler Myers has had a great year. A lot of it is because of the coaching and the way they're setting him up to succeed. So it's a reasonable case. Like I said, I think Ryan Clark is on an island at ESPN, but we'll see what happens. But I said to him, listen, I think you're going to discover that you're at the right end of the argument, but also I'm not holding my breath, because you never say never, right?
So we'll take this as a week, as we have done all year when we look at them. So next Thursday will be Game 5. What do you think the state of the series will be this time next week when we talk? Will we be previewing a conference final, or are we talking about a 3-2 split?
After Game 5 or going into game? Sorry, I think
after Game 5.
Yeah, I think 3-2. I think 3-2, and I'm going to be bold. I think it's going to be Canucks. I think tomorrow night is a massive game, not just because obviously it's game 2, but because this appears to be now a wounded Oilers team. Like if Draisaitl could wake up tomorrow and his back could be feeling better, but I suspect that's not going to be the case. He's obviously dealing with something, and skating is not going to help him get better. Not skating as he did today is probably part of the story here. Is it trying to see if you can give it a little bit of rest, but 1 or 2 days, it's not going to fix anything. So if Draisaitl is, even if he plays, he's not going to be 100%. Adam Henrique, I mean, sure he could play, but also not going to be 100%. Like the Oilers are not playing as in good shape as they are, and the Canucks. I mean, everybody's dealing with something generally at this time of the year in hockey, but the Canucks on the whole are pretty healthy. They're playing like a team that's feeling pretty healthy. The advantage right now is in their court, and so I think that they get a win on Friday night, and yeah, absolutely, the pressure and the weight goes back to Edmonton, but they're going back to Edmonton, and the idea that the Oilers won't win 1, if not 2 of the games there, I just have a hard time imagining.
Yeah, I just look at it. They get the kind of goaltending they got last night. I could see the Canucks going 3-0,
Sure.
and then we know what happened, right?
Yeah.
So. Sorry to bore you with that, Patrick. Yeah. We'll let you go now. I know these. Look, no, playoff hockey's different, just for the media as well. I know you're up late, you're writing your Wired, and then you've got kids to deal with, and you're right back into the next day. So, but we will leave it there. I will thank everyone for listening, for watching. Get all Patrick's stuff, theprovince.com, vancouversun.com. Sign up for Canucks Report delivered to your inbox every day. Also got our playoff posters. We got fun polls going in every story. I've been trying to sneak in. I'm being a little bit cheeky, sneaking in Edmonton sucks as the 4th option on every single story that we write, and it's doing pretty well. I'm just waiting for the complaint. That's all. But great stuff, Patrick. We'll do these as needed early next week. Probably jump back in. Okay, thanks everyone.
I'll just remind everybody off the post. I'm doing the off the post videos with
off the post national.
Nationally. So check those out too.
They got no Leafs to talk about now too.
Yep.
So
just Canucks and Oilers now. They don't know what to say.